Hello, this is Dr. Dan Ames at Brigham Young University in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. This is a presentation on how to build a simple model in ArcMap 10.1 and how to export that model into a Python script and then edit the Python script for use. To begin, I will create a new model, and I'll do that by going to Arc Catalog, looking in my toolboxes, right-clicking, and adding a new tool set. I will call that after myself. Then within that tool set, I can right-click and add a new model. So you may have built models in the past, so this might be familiar to you. We'll start by renaming this model. I'm going to call this Cities Near Rivers, because this will be a simple model that will find cities that happen to be near rivers in the United States. Cities Near Rivers model will be the name of the model and the label. Notice I can use spaces in the label. The description is this model finds cities within 10 miles of rivers in the US. And save it. Alright, so far it's not a very exciting model, but that's okay. The next step is to bring some data into my model. I will bring in a city's shapefile for the United States and a river's shapefile for the United States. And now I will hook them together with some analysis. So we'll start by making a 10-mile buffer around the rivers. And I'll do that by linking the river's shapefile into a buffers tool from Arc Toolbox. I will open the buffers tool and set the distance for the buffer to be 10 miles. The output of this is a polygon shapefile which represents a 10-mile buffer around each river segment. Next, I need to find the intersection between the cities and the river's polygon shapefile, and I will do this with the intersect tool, which I can connect here to both the city's shapefile of points and the river's shapefile of polygons. Now when this intersect runs, the output should be all of the point locations of cities that are within 10 miles of a river. There are actually other ways to do this. There's an easier way using just a select tool, but for the purposes of our Python demonstration, this is probably a good simple model. We've given it a name. Let's save it. One more thing we'll do is indicate that we would like the city shapefile to be a model parameter, the river's shapefile to be a model parameter, and the output feature class to be a model parameter. Let's also give it a little bit better name. I'll call it Cities Near Rivers. Save our model once again and close it. And let's see how it looks when we run it as a model builder model. Double-clicking it here, we see our description on the right-hand side. We see the input shapefiles here and the output shapefile listed. And it's going into our default geodatabase, which is fine. We can run the model and hopefully see the results appear in the map just momentarily. So these are all of the cities in the United States that are within 10 miles of a river. If you want to see the original data, we can bring in our city's shapefile, and you'll see that there are certainly more cities that are not near rivers. Okay, so we know the model runs, and that's always a good first step before moving your model into Python. It's good just to make sure that you've got your logic right. Theoretically, your model will be a lot more complicated than the one we just did, and you can test it in sections and make sure it works properly. What we'll do now is open the model and go to the model menu item, and from here we can choose export to Python script. At this point we have to supply a name. Cities Near Rivers.py is a good name for a Python script, and it is done. What ArcMap has done is taken that model and converted it into this Python file here, which I will show you in a moment. Before we do, we'll close the model. And now we need to actually bring that Python script into ArcMap. to make it nice and clean and usable inside ArcMap. To do that, I can go back to my catalog. I can right-click on my little tool set and click Add a Script. So now I'm starting a new script. This is a short wizard here that we'll need to go through a couple of steps. I'll call this the Cities Near Rivers script and give it a nice clean label, Cities Near Rivers script. Notice we can use spaces in the label. This is a script that finds cities within 10 miles of a river in the US. Now the most important part is on the next page. We click Next and browse to the actual Python file that was made for us. Click Next again. Of course, you could have written that Python file by hand or other ways, but we have it nicely here from the ModelBuilder export. Now the next screen asks you what are the model parameters. Remember in ModelBuilder, when we simply clicked on the model, it gave the user a display of inputs and outputs. We want the same thing to happen with our script. So I'm going to create an input called cities and specify its type to be shapefile. You just do this by simply clicking in the boxes. So I'll click here and I want an input called rivers, and I will choose it also to be a shapefile. And finally, notice that for both of these they default to direction input type required. Well, the third one we will do is cities near rivers. This will be an output. I like working with shapefiles, so we'll just choose shapefile again for the output type. And on this one we need to go to direction and change it to be output. It should also be required. And click Finish. Okay, so what we've just done is set up the user interface for our script. We can see that user interface by simply double-clicking on the script icon here. There are the two inputs, cities and rivers, and the output I made, cities near rivers, and the description. Well, we aren't going to run the script just yet because ArcMap does a pretty good job of creating a default script. We haven't even looked at it yet. There are going to be some problems in that script, and we need to go see what they are, do a little bit of editing before we actually try running it. So I'll close the user interface, and let's get to the script itself. So here it is. I could just open it in a text editor. Rather, what I'm going to do is right-click on the script and choose the Edit menu. And this will bring something called the Python shell. And it's a small editor that lets us actually edit the Python script. So let's take a look at what was created by ArcMap automatically. A little bit of comments at the top. We have to import the ArcPy module, and then we do a few things inside here, such as get a couple of the parameters. Here's the input parameter 1 and 2. These are identified by indexes 0 and 1 and 2, but they're actually parameters 1, 2, and 3. The first two being our inputs of the input city and rivers, and the output, third one being the output of the cities near rivers. We are going to create a small local variable called the buffer, and then we just run it. Here's the buffer analysis. This is the geoprocessing tool right here, buffer analysis. Then we run another one, the intersect analysis, and get the result. You would hope this would just work. And sometimes I'm sure these work, but not usually for me. I'm going to do a little bit of editing to this before we actually run it. The first thing I'm going to do is set the environment workspace to be the folder where my data are. This allows me to reference data without having to give the full path later on. Next thing I'm going to do is set an environment variable, which is overwrite output. I'll set that to true, which means every time you create a new data set, go ahead and overwrite the output data. Don't crash or give me problems. Alright, so now the script arguments. I've pulled the first one into city shape. That's great. I can simplify the case where it can't find city's shape and just tell it, look, if somebody doesn't provide the input, then just use cities.shp and you'll find it, by the way, in my workspace. Next, I'm going to do the same with the rivers. I'll just clean this up a little bit and say, you know what, it's rivers.shape. It already exists in that workspace if the user doesn't provide it. Of course, we said that's a required parameter, so the user will always have to provide it. Then the output, cities near rivers, is input parameter index 2, which is number 3 in our list. And we'll give it a nice clean name, cities near rivers. Rivers.shp, I'd like that to be an output shapefile. Okay, intermediate variable rivers_buffer needs to be changed a little bit. We need to give it a nice name. What it's trying to do right here is just use the same name as the input rivers shapefile. It's this line here that would cause ArcMap to crash if you use the default values. So we'll give it a rivers_buffer.shp file name. That will also be found, or it should be created in this workspace. So that one change there is probably really the only one you would need to do to keep this from crashing out of the box. So we've made that change. Next, we need to step down to the buffer line and double check this and make sure it's going to work just fine. It looks like it's good. It's bringing in the rivers shapefile, and the output will be rivers_buffer2. I don't mind that variable name for that. And it's going to use a 10-mile buffer with rounded end caps. Next, we're going to do the intersection. The intersection, before we do this, I'd like to set up a name for our clip features. Now, follow me here. This is a new variable I just created. I'm bringing into it the rivers buffer and the cities shapefile. So the cities shapefile is defined here. Rivers buffer is here. This won't work because here doesn't have the number 2. So I'll delete the number 2 and the number 2. So now I've got rivers buffer, and rivers buffer is going to be the name. Basically, what I'm doing is setting up a string that has the name of the two files that we're going to be intersecting separated by a semicolon. This is a string that ArcMap's intersect function needs in order to work. ArcMap is trying to do that automatically for us by creating a long string here, and I don't know, it just doesn't really work that well for me. So I'm going to delete the default one they gave, and instead we'll just put our clip features in that spot. So now the input variable is clip features, the output variable is cities near rivers, and we're going to intersect everything. It should be good to go. So the result of this should be a cities near rivers shapefile that we can then add to ArcMap. Let's test it. Okay, we'll test it by saving the file we just edited, close the file, go back to the catalog where I've been working, and let's try running it here. We'll run it by double-clicking the script. It's sort of a script tool is really what it is. We'll select our cities input file. We'll select our rivers input file. We'll double check the output. I really don't want that to go to a geodatabase. I'd rather just go ahead and set it right in my data USA folder, and we'll give it a name, cities near rivers.shp. There's my output. Click OK and let it run. Well, the script just completed, and it created the cities near rivers shapefile, and it added it to the map. What more could you ask for? So that's the end of my quick demonstration on how to make a model, export it to a script, edit the script to be a little more functional than the default script, and then run the script with parameters. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. Good luck as you work on your projects.